The smell of perfume lingered in the air. Her phone screen lit up with a message, and she quickly shoved it face down. I had seen that same message pop up more than once, but it wasn't until tonight that I couldn't ignore it any longer. Her betrayal was as obvious as the glass of whiskey in my hand. I could feel the coldness in the room long before she even looked at me. It was a typical Tuesday evening, or at least that's what I thought. After a long day of running my company, I came home to find Evelyn sitting at the kitchen counter, her phone face down, as usual. She didn't hear me come in. I stood by the doorway for a second, watching her, tapping her finger nervously against the glass of wine. Something was off. Her eyes flicked toward the phone, her hand almost reaching for it, before she pulled back quickly. Then she did something I hadn't seen her do in years. She changed the subject. "You should join me for the movie tonight," she said, attempting to smile, but it wasn't the smile I'd known for the past 12 years. It was forced, anxious. She was trying to hide something. This was the moment everything hit me, cold, clear, and undeniable. She was hiding something, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I threw the door closed behind me, and she froze. "Who the hell is Tom?" I spat out. Her face turned white, like she'd been caught stealing from the house. There was no line or way out of it this time. Tom, whoever he was, had been texting her for weeks. "Nothing. Just a friend," she stammered, but the guilt in her voice was loud enough to cut through the tension in the room. "Friend? Don't feed me that crap." I was done with pretending I didn't know what was happening. She had crossed the line, and I was no longer the same calm, patient guy I used to be. That night, the floodgates opened. It wasn't just a slip-up. It wasn't some harmless flirtation. No, Evelyn was cheating on me, and I wasn't going to sit here like some fool, letting it slide. This would be the last time she disrespected me, and I was about to make sure she understood that. I'm Robert, 40 years old, self-made, and I don't take betrayal lightly. I built my company from the ground up, and I've lived my life with one principle above all: loyalty. Loyalty to my work, to my friends, and to my wife. But apparently, Evelyn didn't think those same rules applied to her. We met years ago, when we were both young, ambitious, and full of ideas. I was just starting my business, trying to make a name for myself, and she was a bright, energetic woman who seemed like she could take on the world. We got married after 3 years, and for a while, everything was perfect. We had the house, the vacations, the weekends at the cabin, everything anyone could want. Hell, we even enjoyed simple nights at home, cooking together. Life was good, but somewhere along the way, she started changing. It was subtle at first: new clothes, new interests, a new friend group that I wasn't a part of. She'd always been the one who encouraged me to focus on my business, but the more time I spent building it, the more she seemed to drift away. I'd always been too focused on work. I won't deny that. But I never thought I'd come home to find her slipping away from me. Not like this. She hadn't just grown apart, as she tried to tell me. No, this was different. The signs were there if I had been paying attention. Her late nights, her obsession with her phone, the way she acted when I tried to get close. But I had been blinded by my own success, too consumed with my work to notice the cracks in my own marriage until they were too wide to ignore. When I asked her that night about Tom, I had no idea how deep this went. I thought maybe it was just a one-time thing, some stupid mistake, but I quickly realized I was wrong. And by then, I was already too angry to care about excuses. That night, as I stared at her frozen face, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. Evelyn was lying. And when someone lies to me, especially when it's someone I've trusted with everything, I don't give second chances. I don't give pity. I give consequences. It's how I built my life, and it's how I was going to handle this. I wanted to keep it together. I really did. But that night I couldn't. The thought of her with someone else, some other man, made my blood boil. She tried to make excuses, to apologize. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Rob. It was just a moment of weakness," she said. But there's no such thing as a moment of weakness when you've been lying for weeks. I grabbed her phone from the counter and threw it on the table, right in front of her. "This is how you've been spending your nights, Evelyn? Lying to me? Playing games with someone behind my back?" She sat there, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open, trying to form some kind of defense. But she knew as well as I did that this was over. No more apologies. No more trying to explain her way out of it. "What's his name?" I demanded, grabbing her by the wrist. Tom. Who the hell is Tom? She hesitated, her eyes darting from side to side. He's just a friend from the cooking class. A friend? I shook my head in disgust. Don't lie to me. I don't give a damn about cooking classes, or hobbies, or some guy from a class. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Her silence was all the answer I needed. You might be thinking, why does this matter? Why should I keep listening? Well, let me tell you, this story is more than just about infidelity. It's about a man who's had enough. It's about Robert, the guy who worked hard for everything he's built, who gave his all to a woman who's throwing it all away for some other guy. And that's where things get interesting. This is where I'm going to show you something different. There's no walking away from this. I'm not the guy who sits by, watching my life fall apart. No, I'm going to make her feel it. Every single part of it. Because once someone betrays you like this, they don't deserve any kind of mercy. And if you're still watching, if you're still wondering what happens next, you'll see what happens when a man takes control, when a man decides he's done being the nice guy. The days that followed the first confrontation were filled with tension. Evelyn tried to act as if everything were normal, but I could see the cracks in her demeanor. She was careful, more guarded than ever. Her once affectionate gestures had become forced. The kiss before bed felt like a formality. Her eyes no longer held the warmth they once did when she looked at me. There was an unfamiliar distance between us, one that no amount of pretending could erase. I tried to ignore it. I had work to do, and I didn't want to be the kind of man who let personal problems interfere with my business. But it was impossible to focus when the weight of Evelyn's deception was hanging over me like a dark cloud. At first, I told myself that maybe I was overreacting. She'd been distant, sure, but maybe it was just a phase. Everyone goes through rough patches. Maybe I had let work consume me too much. But there was something about the way she spoke about the cooking class that didn't sit right. She'd get this defensive tone when I asked about it, as if she were hiding something. And every time I mentioned Tom, just casually, as if I didn't already know, I saw her flinch. She would brush it off with a nervous laugh, telling me how she was just learning to cook or getting out of the house for once. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. And then came the phone. Her phone, which had always been so accessible to me, suddenly became a fortress. It was like she was carrying it everywhere. She started using it in the car, even when we were together. It wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It felt deliberate. She knew I was watching, and she was hiding something. I wasn't a fool. I'd been a successful businessman for long enough to spot the signs of someone trying to cover their tracks. I decided to wait. I didn't want to make another rash move. I wasn't going to confront her again until I had solid proof. I would not give her another chance to lie to my face. The tipping point came on a Thursday night. I had come home later than expected from an important business meeting. Normally, I would have expected Evelyn to be on the couch watching TV or starting dinner, but the house was unusually quiet. I found her in the bedroom, pacing. When she saw me, she quickly stopped, giving me an awkward smile. She looked flustered, like she had been caught doing something she knew she shouldn't have been doing. "Hey, you're late," she said, trying to make her voice sound casual, but I heard the slight tremor in it. "I'm sorry," I replied, voice flat. "I didn't realize the meeting would run so late." "What are you doing?" "I was just tidying up." Her voice was defensive, but I didn't say anything. I've been around long enough to know that when someone is trying too hard to act casual, there's something they're hiding. And I knew exactly what it was. But it wasn't what she said that caught my attention. It was the phone, the one she always kept close to her. It was sitting face up on the nightstand, the screen glowing softly. As I walked past, I caught a glimpse of a name that sent a chill down my spine. Tom. There it was again, the same name. I felt my stomach tighten. I knew she'd been texting him, but this was the first time I'd seen his name up close, this clearly. The panic in her eyes when she saw me notice the phone was enough to confirm everything I already suspected. "I'll be right back," I said, barely giving her a chance to react. I walked over to the phone, picked it up, and unlocked it without hesitation. I had to know. What I saw didn't surprise me. It infuriated me. The texts were all there. The playful messages, the flirtation, the promises. "I miss you so much," one read. "Can't wait for us to meet again," another. It was obvious. There was no question about it now. I slammed the phone back onto the nightstand. What the hell is this? I growled, turning to face her. My voice was low, controlled, but I could feel the fury building inside me. Evelyn froze, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I'm done with the lies, Evelyn, I said, cutting her off. My hands were clenched in a fist at my sides, but I was determined not to raise them. I would not lose control. Not yet. I know what's been going on. I know about you and him. You think I'm blind? Rob, I swear, it's not what you think, she stammered, her eyes welling with tears. It's just a mistake. It was just a mistake. I interrupted, my voice rising. You've been meeting him for months. Don't give me that shit. You think I'm stupid? She flinched, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. I wasn't used to this side of Evelyn. She was always the one who could talk her way out of things, who could manipulate the situation to her favor. But this time, there was no escaping it. I wasn't the man she thought I was. I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk all over me. Tell me everything. Now! My voice was a command, not a plea. Who is Tom? How long has this been going on? I met him in the cooking class. I swear, it didn't mean anything, she said, tears spilling down her face. We just talked, and one thing led to another. It wasn't planned. I shook my head. You've been lying to me for months, Evelyn. I've known for a while, but I kept giving you the benefit of the doubt. But you don't get that anymore. You don't get to destroy everything we built like this. I could feel my anger starting to boil over. The last few months, where I had tried to ignore the warning signs, the doubts, they all came crashing down on me in an instant. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been careless. She had betrayed me, and there was no room for mercy anymore. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at her, my anger barely contained. I wasn't shouting, wasn't losing control like some pathetic fool. No, I had learned long ago that being calm and calculating in moments like this made the other person feel the weight of their actions far more than any outburst could. Evelyn sat across from me, trembling now, her hands folded in her lap, her entire body shaking as she tried to find the words. But I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I'm done, I said flatly, my voice steady. I don't want to hear it. You made your choice, and you'll have to live with it. This marriage is over. Her face twisted in shock. Please, Rob, don't. No, Evelyn, you don't get to plead with me. You've been sleeping with another man. You've been lying to my face for months, and now you want to beg for my forgiveness? You think it's going to fix this? She stood up, taking a few shaky steps toward me. Please, I'll end it with him. I promise. I was just confused. I was lonely. We can work through this, please. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I just looked at her, coldly. It's too late for that. You don't get a second chance after this. The confrontation was only the beginning. I wasn't a fool. I knew what I had to do next. She needed to feel the weight of her actions. And while Evelyn may have thought she could patch things up, I was already planning the next phase, making sure she never forgot the price of betraying me. The silence in the room was deafening after I delivered my verdict. Evelyn sat there, tears streaming down her face, her hands wringing together nervously as she tried to find the words to undo everything she had done. But I wasn't interested in her words. She had used words for months to deceive me, sweet promises, excuses, lies that slowly chipped away at the trust we once had. I'll end it, Rob, she begged, her voice hoarse with emotion. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, just give me one more chance. I stood up slowly, taking in the scene before me. The woman who I had shared my life with, the woman I thought was my partner, now reduced to pleading for forgiveness. But it was too late for that. Her actions had already condemned her. I wasn't some naive fool who could be manipulated back into the same situation. I had given her everything, my trust, my time, my life, and she had tossed it aside for some meaningless affair. I didn't shout at her. I didn't call her names. I wasn't going to stoop to that level. Instead, I looked at her, coldly, with the kind of clarity that only comes after a betrayal of this magnitude. This isn't about you being confused, Evelyn, I said quietly, my tone dead serious. This is about you choosing to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back. You've been seeing him, Tom, for months, And now you want me to just forgive you because you're sorry? It doesn't work like that. She tried to stand up, but I raised my hand to stop her. Sit down, I commanded. I'm not going to entertain any more of this. You've already made your choice, and now you'll live with it. The anger inside me was still simmering, but I wasn't going to let it control me. No, I had learned long ago that emotional outbursts didn't solve anything. I wasn't some fool who would act on impulse. I wasn't going to let her think that she could walk away unscathed. I moved toward the door, not even bothering to look back at her. I couldn't bear the sight of her anymore. Not the woman I once loved, but the stranger who had betrayed me. My mind was made up. The marriage was over. I wasn't the type of man who would waste his time begging for something that was already lost. Evelyn, I said, my back to her as I grabbed my coat, I've been patient. I've given you every chance to be honest with me, and you've thrown it all away. But I'm done. I'm done being the fool. I won't be disrespected like this anymore. Her voice trembled as she called after me, but I didn't stop. I'll take care of everything, I said, my voice final. The divorce papers will be coming soon. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's over. I walked out of the room without a second thought, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I wouldn't. Once I was out of the house and in the solitude of my car, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. My mind was racing. I had always been the man in control of every situation. In business, I didn't let my emotions get in the way of my decisions, and I wasn't about to let this personal betrayal derail me either. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just the fact that Evelyn had cheated. It was the way she had done it. The lies, the sneaking around, the sheer disrespect she had shown me. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of who I was. And that was something I couldn't let go of easily. I had no intention of just walking away from this unscathed. She had made the decision to destroy our life together, and I would make sure she felt every ounce of the pain she had caused. But I wasn't going to let anger dictate my actions. I would be calculated, methodical. The plan would be simple. Hit her where it hurt the most. In her career, in her social circle. Make sure everyone knew what she had done. I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. And then there was Tom, the man who had caused all this. The man who thought he could get away with this and walk back into his life unscathed. He was going to pay for his part in this. I wasn't just going to let him slink away into the shadows. No, he needed to feel the repercussions too. I would take everything from her. Her friends, her reputation, her career. Everything she had built with me was about to come crumbling down. It would be slow, deliberate, but she would feel it. I started by taking control of what I could. The first step was to make sure Evelyn's social circle knew exactly what kind of person she had become. I had friends, colleagues, people who respected me, and I wasn't about to let Evelyn slither out of this without facing the consequences. I began calling in favors friends from my business life, people I trusted. I made sure they knew exactly what had been going on. I didn't need to get into the details. I didn't need to paint a vivid picture of what she'd done. I simply told them the truth. Evelyn's been having an affair for months. I'm divorcing her. And that was enough. It didn't take long for the news to spread. In a small town like ours, word got around fast. I watched from the sidelines as Evelyn's friends began distancing themselves. She had always been the social butterfly, the center of attention in our circle. But once people knew about her betrayal, it didn't take long for her to lose that. One by one, people stopped calling. The invitations stopped coming. I didn't do this out of spite. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about making sure she understood that her actions had consequences. She couldn't just wreck our lives and then move on like nothing happened. She had to feel it. Next, I turned my attention to Tom. I didn't know him well, but that didn't matter. I knew enough to get started. He was a chef at a local restaurant, a small, intimate place that catered to wealthy clientele. It was well known in the community, and I had connections to people who frequented it. I started by gathering information. I had the means to do so, and I wasn't shy about using them. I dug into his past, his career, his relationships, any skeletons in his closet. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Tom had been involved in some shady dealings with suppliers, under-the-table payments, illegal products being sold off the books. It wasn't anything major, but it was enough to make him nervous if it got out. I contacted one of my friends who worked in the food industry and casually mentioned that I had some information about a local chef. A few weeks later, I made sure that the restaurant's owners found out about the shady dealings. I didn't need to make a scene, just a quiet word in the right ear. The next thing I knew, Tom was out of a job. That was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I made sure his reputation took a serious hit. Word spread about his shady practices. He wasn't going to get a job anywhere else, not with the kind of attention I'd drawn to him. And Evelyn? She was left to pick up the pieces. I didn't care if she begged or pleaded. I wasn't about to let her off the hook. The divorce itself was straightforward, but I made sure it wasn't easy for her. I knew the law, and I knew how to play the game. I had the leverage, and I wasn't about to give it up. I filed for divorce with clear terms. I would take the house. I would take the savings. I made sure she was left with nothing. Every investment, every asset, everything we had built together was mine. And I was going to make sure she didn't get a penny more than she deserved. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about possessions. It was about control. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. Not after everything she had done to me. By the time the divorce was final, I was already moving on. I had no time to waste on regrets or guilt. I wasn't going to mourn the loss of a woman who had shown me nothing but contempt. Evelyn's world was crumbling, and I was fine with it. I didn't need her in my life anymore. But she would never forget what she had lost. And neither would Tom. The weeks after the divorce filing were a strange kind of limbo. I was no longer just a man whose life had been betrayed. I had become someone who was in complete control of the situation. Every step I took, every word I spoke, it all worked toward one simple goal: to make Evelyn understand the full weight of her actions. She had thought she could have it all. She thought she could betray me, lie to me, and just walk away with no consequences. But I was teaching her a lesson she'd never forget. I kept my distance. I didn't engage in any pointless arguments or pleading. She tried, of course. She called, texted, sent letters, and even showed up at my office, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. Every time she attempted to reach out, I just ignored her. That, more than anything, drove her crazy. She thought she could break me, that she could somehow worm her way back into my life. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I had seen her for what she truly was, and I was no longer playing the fool. Instead, I spent my time executing the plan I had laid out for her. I started by reaching out to the people closest to her, people I knew would help me make the impact I wanted. I didn't need to be obvious about it. I didn't need to shout my anger at the world. All I needed was to be subtle, to let her feel the cold weight of her own mistakes. I didn't have to do much to make sure Evelyn's social life crumbled. In the world we lived in, gossip was the most powerful weapon anyone could wield. I didn't go around telling people about her affair. No, that wasn't necessary. I just made sure the right people knew. I started with her closest friends, the women who had always surrounded her at every party, every gathering. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't need to launch an attack. I simply spoke the truth. I made sure they knew the real reason behind the divorce. It didn't take long for them to start distancing themselves. Evelyn had always been the life of the party, the social center of our circle, but now that her betrayal was out in the open, things began to change quickly. I didn't get involved in the drama. I didn't have to. People began to talk. And as the whispers spread, Evelyn found herself alone. One by one, the people she thought were her friends started pulling away. I didn't need to make any direct accusations. The truth of the affair was all that needed to be said. The emotional toll on her was immediate, and I could see it happening. Her phone calls grew fewer. Her invites to dinners and gatherings dried up. She no longer had the attention she had once enjoyed. The woman who had been the queen of her social scene was now a pariah. At first, Evelyn fought it. She called me. She sent me messages, desperate to fix things, to convince me that she was still the same person, that she had made a mistake. But I wasn't having it. I ignored every word. The more she begged, the more I took pleasure in watching her slip further away from everything she had built. She needed me, but I didn't need her. And that, more than anything, crushed her. Evelyn wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying her entire life, her entire reputation. And while I had already made sure she knew that I was in control of our marriage's downfall, It was time to show Tom just how easily I could make his life crumble as well. I had already done the groundwork. I had dug into his past, his career, and everything that could possibly ruin him. What I hadn't anticipated was how easily the rest of the world would take care of the rest. Tom, the man who had been fooling around with my wife, was no match for the storm I was about to unleash. I began by contacting one of my old friends, someone in the food industry, and casually mentioned that I had heard about some shady dealings at the restaurant Tom worked for. It wasn't anything major, just a few small infractions, sloppy record-keeping, late payments to suppliers, the occasional under-the-table deal, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. My contact didn't waste any time getting the right people involved. Before I knew it, the restaurant was investigating Tom's dealings. It didn't take long for the news to get back to the higher-ups at the restaurant. Tom's job was on the line. I didn't stop there. I made sure that everyone who worked with Tom knew what was happening. Word spread fast, and once his superiors found out, they didn't hesitate to let him go. His professional reputation, one he had built for years, was destroyed in the span of a week. The man who had come into my home and betrayed me was now left with nothing. No job, no connections, no safety net. He would have to start over, but no one would forget what he had done. As the gossip spread, his name became synonymous with dishonor. He was a man without a future, all because he had decided to sleep with my wife. I wasn't going to leave this just at the social or professional level. No, Evelyn needed to feel the sting in every corner of her life. I had worked too hard to let her walk away without losing everything. It was time to hit her financially, where it would hurt the most. I knew Evelyn wasn't stupid. She'd made sure to keep some assets hidden away from me during our marriage, but I had already anticipated that. I made sure to have all the paperwork in place, documents, records, assets, so that when it came time to divide everything, I had control. I wasn't interested in petty arguments over property. No, I wanted to make sure that she felt the consequences of her choices in every aspect of her life. The divorce wasn't a simple cut and dry affair. I made sure the terms were clear. I took the house, the cars, and most of her shared savings. I didn't leave her completely destitute, but I made sure she was far from comfortable. She would have to start over, rebuild everything from scratch. And that, more than anything, made me feel at peace. The legal proceedings went smoothly. My lawyer was efficient, cold, and relentless. We played the game by the rules, but I had the upper hand. There was no escaping it for Evelyn. She thought she could betray me and just move on with her life as though nothing had changed. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I was making sure that every dollar, every asset, every piece of our life together was now mine. By the time the divorce was finalized, Evelyn was a shadow of the woman I had once known. She tried to reach out, of course. She sent me messages begging for forgiveness, asking if there was any chance we could work things out. She promised she would end things with Tom, that she would go to counseling, that we could start fresh. But I wasn't interested in starting fresh. I had already moved on. Each message from her felt like a pathetic attempt to regain control of the life she had lost. And I wasn't going to give her that power. I had moved on emotionally long before the divorce papers were signed. My decision was final, and there was nothing she could say or do that would change it. Her calls grew more frequent, more desperate. At one point, she even had the audacity to show up at my office, but I had her turned away at the door. I wasn't the same man I used to be. The man who had loved her unconditionally. That man had died the moment she cheated. As time passed, I found peace in my decision. I didn't seek revenge out of anger or bitterness. I sought it because I knew it was what she deserved. I had taken everything from her. Her reputation, her friends, her lover, and her wealth. And in return, I had gained everything. Control, respect, a life free from deceit. I wasn't interested in jumping into another relationship. I didn't need anyone to fill the void Evelyn had left. What I had gained was my independence. I had taken the pieces of my life back and reassembled them into something stronger, something better. The betrayal had broken me at first, but in the end, it had made me into someone better, someone who would never again allow someone to manipulate or lie to him. Evelyn? She never really recovered. She tried, of course. She moved to another city, started over, but she could never escape the shadow of her betrayal. Her friends, her social circle. None of them could ever look at her the same way. Tom, the man she had chosen over me, was long gone, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her choices. And as for me, I walked away from it all a stronger man, wiser, and far more cautious. I had learned that loyalty was something you can't just take for granted. It had to be earned, and once it was lost, there was no going back. Time passed, and though the world around me had returned to some semblance of normalcy, I couldn't escape the feeling of satisfaction that came from knowing I had taken full control of the situation. My life was mine again, free of the lies, the deceit, and the betrayal Evelyn had inflicted. But while I had moved on, Evelyn was still caught in the wreckage of her actions. She never gave up, though. Even as she lost everything, she kept coming back. I'd hear from her now and then, at first through messages, then through phone calls, and eventually even through visits. Every attempt felt like a desperate plea to undo what she had done, to regain some control over the life she had destroyed. It wasn't that I was bitter. It was just that I had no sympathy left for her. After everything, she had no right to try and return to the life she had taken for granted. I had become someone else, stronger, colder, more resolved. Her voice, her presence, her apologies, it all felt like noise to me. I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. But that didn't stop her. Her first letter came a month after the divorce papers were finalized. In it, she tried to appeal to my sense of compassion. She wrote that she was sorry, and that she would do anything to make things right. I read it once, and then I tossed it into the trash. It wasn't an apology. It was a desperate, hollow attempt to regain the power she'd lost. And I wasn't going to give it to her. Then came the phone calls. They started off polite, but soon they became frantic. "Please, Rob," she begged over the phone. "I'm so sorry. I've made a huge mistake. I'll end things with Tom. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." But it was too late. Her words held no weight anymore. What I had gained from the aftermath wasn't just revenge. It was my own clarity. I had learned that when someone betrays you this deeply, there's no going back. There's no erasing the damage they've done. When she showed up at my office, her face pale and tired, I didn't even blink. She stood in front of me, eyes filled with the same fear and regret that had consumed her for months. I could see her desperation, her desire to get back into my good graces, but it was nothing but a waste of my time. "What do you want, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice controlled but firm. "I want to fix this. Please," she said, her hands trembling as she grasped at any thread of hope she could find. "I never meant to hurt you. I was confused. I wasn't thinking, but I've realized what I had with you, and I'll do anything to make it right." I stared at her, taking in the woman who had once been my partner, the woman I thought I could trust. She was broken, but I wasn't going to put the pieces back together. Not for her, not for anyone. "Evelyn," I said, my voice low and direct. "You've had your chances. You lost everything when you decided to lie to me. And now, you want me to forgive you? There's nothing left to fix." Her face twisted in agony, the tears she had cried over the months finally catching up to her. But I wasn't moved. I had made my peace with this, and I wouldn't allow her to manipulate me back into the cycle of hurt. "Goodbye, Evelyn," I said, standing up from my desk. "Don't come back. Don't waste your time. You're not welcome here anymore." And with that, I walked out of my office, leaving her standing there alone. I thought that was the end. I thought I was done, that I had successfully navigated the fallout from Evelyn's betrayal, and that I had closed the chapter of my life that she had poisoned. But, as it often is with things you think are finished, life has a way of throwing unexpected twists. Weeks after that final confrontation, a friend of mine, Mark, someone I trusted, called me with some news that caught me completely off guard. It wasn't about Evelyn, it was about Tom. Apparently, Tom had been making moves, not in the way I expected, but in a way that was far more insidious. I had assumed, after losing his job and reputation, that Tom would lay low, but he didn't. He was targeting Evelyn's finances. He had been in touch with her, without my knowledge, and apparently, they were trying to secure some form of settlement. A secret agreement. A way for her to try to get her hands on more of the assets we had shared. Tom, it seemed, wasn't the bumbling fool I had thought him to be. In fact, he had his own plan all along. He was using Evelyn to secure a portion of the wealth I had rightfully taken from her in the divorce. It wasn't about love or affection anymore. It was about money. Tom wanted revenge. He had always been in it for himself, and now he was trying to use Evelyn to get back at me. When I heard the news, I was stunned. I had underestimated both of them. Evelyn's attempt at reconciliation was nothing more than a ploy to get me to drop my guard. She was still in league with him. They weren't done trying to tear me down. They were just getting started, and now I had one more thing to handle. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not after everything. I knew what I had to do. I contacted my lawyer, who had already been involved in the divorce. We didn't just want to make sure that Evelyn was financially ruined. I wanted to make sure Tom never had the chance to hurt me again. I dug deeper into Tom's background, and this time, I didn't hold back. I had the means to bring him to his knees legally, financially, and socially. I made sure to have a meeting with Evelyn, where I calmly laid out everything I had learned about her secret dealings with Tom. The phone calls, the meetings, the underhanded scheme they had been trying to pull. Do you really think I wouldn't find out? I asked her, leaning in as I looked her in the eyes. Do you think you can just pull the wool over my eyes again? She recoiled, her face going pale as the weight of her actions sank in. She tried to protest, but I wasn't listening anymore. I'm making sure you pay for this, Evelyn. You wanted to drag me back into this mess, so now you get to deal with the consequences. The rest was swift. I sent the information to the authorities, ensuring they knew about the fraudulent attempt to gain more money, using Tom's manipulations. They took it seriously, too seriously for her liking. Tom's involvement in the scam was revealed, and he was fired from another job he had managed to secure. His reputation, what little was left, was destroyed once again. And Evelyn? She lost even more. She tried to fight it, but the legal proceedings were set in motion. She had nothing left to fall back on. Her friends had turned their backs on her, and now she had no money, no career, and no future. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. Evelyn's life spiraled out of control. She left town, moving to a new city with nothing but the remnants of the life she had built before. Tom vanished, disappearing from the public eye. The two of them had tried to destroy me, but in the end, it was them who were left with nothing. As for me, I didn't feel any satisfaction in their downfall. I didn't feel triumph. I simply felt at peace. The truth was I was stronger now. I had built something from nothing, fought my way through betrayal, and come out the other side not as a broken man, but as someone who had learned how to protect what mattered. I had learned that loyalty isn't something you can ever take for granted. And once it's broken, there's no going back. But I also learned that some things, some people, are simply not worth fighting for. I didn't need Evelyn anymore. I had taken control of my life again, and that's all that mattered. The only thing I had left to do now was move forward. And that was the best revenge of all.